Everyone. Sorry for the delay. Our speakers are just joining the room, but I thought maybe I would just start off the discussion and hopefully in a minute they will be here with us. So this workshop today, we're talking about physical spaces for our movement. And we had three speakers for you. Unfortunately, one of them had to drop out. So I'm going to try and give you a little flavor of what he was going to say and then direct you in his direction as well to speak more about it. So with us today, we should have shortly Craig from the Black Cat Workers Cooperative, which are an incredible organisation in Aberdeen that are doing some amazing stuff that he's going to tell you about shortly. And we also should have Linus, who is from, well, I'm hoping Linus can get here and help me with the pronunciation of the place where he's from. It's a whole neighbourhood in a town in the Basque Country, which was scheduled for demolition. And the local community disagreed with that decision and took it over and turned it into an occupied autonomous neighborhood. So it's like a whole, several streets of houses, and they have a community center, cinema, all kinds of stuff. It's really quite an incredible, inspiring example. So I'm really hoping Linus will be back in the room soon and we'll get him onto the screen to talk about that. But I just wanted to say a little bit about why I thought of I wanted to take part in this workshop today, which is there's a couple of experiences which inspired me to think this is a really important topic, which is, first of all, about 11 years ago, I got to go on a visit to the Basque Country myself to talk about the independence movement in Scotland and to meet activists over there to see what their movement was like. And something that really, really struck me right away was that not in the Basque Country, but in small villages, out in the countryside, places like that, there are everywhere bars, community centres, occupied spaces run by local young people that are autonomous and run themselves, but are connected to the Basque pro-independence left. And you expect to see that maybe in a big city, but like I say, out in small villages, there'll be an abandoned building and local young people have turned it into a cultural project, a place that can have music, produce a magazine, produce alternative media and stuff like that. So it was really an incredible experience for me. And I really strongly hope that as RIC redevelops, we can get over and the pandemic recedes, we can get over to the Basque Country and we can see some of what they kind of infrastructure they have there to inspire us to go further in Scotland as well. The other experience for me that really inspired me towards this topic was being involved in the Free Hetherington occupation at Glasgow University in 2011, which was when there was a students' union building at the university which had gone derelict because of lack of funding and support from the university. So it was several floors, had bars and kitchens, but it was all lying empty. And at the time, we had a very large student movement about cuts and imposed fees by the UK government. So as a part of the protest movement, we took over that building and ran it for 6 months and ran it as like an independent cultural centre, place where we had academic staff coming and giving away free lectures, music, comedy nights, poets coming in and doing recitations, all types of stuff that was free and of access to the whole local community. And my experience with that was that our wider movement and the demonstrating and protesting we were doing about education issues at the time massively benefited from having that hub, that space where we all knew you could go and we could get organized. Just before I bring in the first of our guests, so I think we've got Elias on the moderation panel. I'm not sure if Craig has also joined the room as well. How you doing? Yeah, I'll just say quickly about the guest that couldn't join us today. Unfortunately, has had to drop out. And that's Mike Blackshaw from the Edinburgh Yes Hub. So the Edinburgh Yes Hub is one of lots of shop fronts and little community venues popped up during the referendum. The one in Edinburgh is one that has survived and kept going and is a host for community events. They sell merchandise and information and books related to independence. And it's really an important kind of hub for the independence movement in Edinburgh. And the other thing that would have been really useful, it's a shame we don't have Mike here to contribute, is that he also gives advice to other independence groups around the country who are thinking of doing something similar, seeing if they can get a shop front, seeing if they can get the sustainable income to keep it going and enough people to volunteer to make it worthwhile. So I'm hoping he's someone we can get back in for that discussion at a later date, because I think he's got a lot of expertise he could bring to it. I just wanted to throw in before we start that he suggests, it's all very well to get a proper shop front and a full building, but he talked about in some places people have a garden that faces the street, and if you've got that, you can set up a shed and have your own Yes Hub at very low cost, a place where you can discuss with people and make clear when there'll be people there up for doing active action, organising and talking about politics together. So I thought that was a really interesting idea, is one I hadn't thought of what would be possible. But yeah, now we're going to go to the first of our two speakers, who's Elias from the Black Cat Workers Cooperative. When I finish speaking, I'm going to drop links in the chat to each of the projects that our speakers are involved with. And then after that, we're going to have a discussion, hopefully inspired by some of the things that our two speakers told us about what other projects this inspires us to do, what advice we would need, what help we would need to be able to contemplate doing more stuff like this across Scotland. But yeah, Elias, I'll hand over to you for more about Black Cat Worker Cooperative. Thanks very much for joining us.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. I was hoping that our colleague Craig would be here as well. He knows a lot more about all the little nitty-gritty and all the little details that people usually find more interesting, or that they want to ask more about, because it's all well and good saying, oh, you can go set up a co-op, it's totally doable, but everyone's like, well, how? What's the paperwork I need? What's the little fine print? What's all the details and stuff I need to do? But basically, I'm going to try to keep this short. So we're Black Cat Workers Co-op. We run a live music venue and bar in Aberdeen called Krakatoa. It's all owned by the workers. We're all co-directors. Some people are on a volunteer basis. Some people do wage shifts, just depending on sort of what you can contribute and how much you can contribute. We've been active for quite a few years. Initially privately owned, and the owner, who was a personal anarchist syndicalist, decided to change it over to the co-op model. And since then, we've been growing and getting more people on board and trying new projects and trying to give back to the community. I think some of the main aspects that people are interested in or should be interested in is twofold. First of all, like, how do you start? How do you set one up if you want to? And then I also get a lot of questions about how it runs and like the sort of day-to-day. So the first question there, I can give you a couple of basic points. I don't know all the details. That's where I was hoping Craig would get in. But basically, if you don't own infrastructure yourself, right, which a lot of us don't, because we're normal people and we don't own lots of property, you can apply for something called a community asset transfer, CAT for short. This is a Scottish government thing. I think it exists in England as well, but in Scotland you can get a bunch of details about it on the Scottish government website. They have a whole thing in the community empowerment section right there, community asset transfer. And basically what you need is, I think, like 3 people, a plan, and like a relatively cheap sort of starting amount, like a few £100 or something. And you apply for community possession of a building or a piece of land, basically a piece of infrastructure that is owned by the council or that is being unused. And you say, hey, I can do something with this, give it to me. We're going to turn it into something cool that benefits the community. So that's kind of your starting point. I think you need 3 people for that at minimum, which is, achievable. The next step is, if you want to set up properly as like a cooperative, there's a couple little categories in Scotland that you're going to want to sort of decide how you fit in with it. So like we're a non-profit. I think we're limited by guarantee. I'm not very big on the whole business side of things, so can't tell you 100% sure. But there's a whole bunch of little categories and stuff. Basically, the problem is that you have to incorporate as this right kind of entity, right? So there's like a small little legal shenanigan that you have to kind of do correctly to become the right kind of group that you want to be to function according to your needs. And for that, there are articles of incorporation. So you have like a whole thing of paperwork that says we're going to run this way, we're going to do these things, we're going to exist in this kind of form. And we actually spent a bit of time and money on getting some of those drafted up, which we like to make freely available to anyone else in Scotland who wants to set up a co-op. So that can save you a lot of trouble and hassle. If you are looking to set up a co-op, give us a shout at Black Cat and we can give you some documentation, we can give you some templates, we can help you get all the little, all the P's and Q's and the I's dotted and whatnot. I think that's the big things for the setting up. Community asset transfer, articles of incorporation, 3 people, a little bit of money, but if you have a vision, you can go with it. As for the day-to-day, yeah, people always have some question that they've wondered about, like, how does it work? How does it, you know, how is it different from normal workplaces? How do things go on? We have a whole sort of induction period where we sort of teach people about what we understand as a way that you work, sort of like as your own authority person, that you don't have a hierarchical system, where you don't need to be told what to do by a boss, where you can use your own like ability, your own intelligence, your own common sense and decision making to operate in the best way that you see fit. We have what's called zones of authority. So everyone is assigned to a certain zone, which includes certain tasks and responsibilities. This is usually done by voting. We have elections every now and again to sort of, you know, people can nominate themselves for a certain position. Excuse me, I'm not feeling super well. And then that's just their zone. And then they just have to take care of that. And if you screw up, then people can vote you out. If you screw up really badly, then you have to find a way to make reparations. It's the way things would run if people just were able to do things. So of course we have to be a little bit careful about who we get on board, and we have interview processes and selections, but we do want to get as many people involved as possible. And we have, you know, certain mechanisms for if ever there's a bad faith actor, or if someone starts taking the piss, or if someone's just being a disruptive force. There's a number of ways that the co-op as a community can deal with that without getting, you know, like too authoritative or anything. But I find it works very well. We've been active for quite a few years. We've never really had any major problems. We've had a couple of interpersonal issues here and there that have been resolved quite neatly. I'm trying to think of any specific examples, but I mean, I think the best one I had was a couple of years ago. One of the bartender members was wondering if it'd be possible to raise like the sort of overtime pay for like Christmas and New Year's, or to like just make those shifts a bit more valuable. So they simply asked whoever was in charge of the sort of spreadsheets, the finance, would it be possible? Can we afford it? Answer came back, yeah, we can afford to double it. So they put it to a vote. Should we double the, you know, hourly rate for this kind of event? And it passed. And then that was that. And that's just how it works. You can you can submit a vote. You can do whatever you want to do, basically. And if you screw up and the co-op goes, then it's because you screwed up. But with enough people involved and enough people sort of watching out for each other and watching each other's backs, and with a good sense of community, you can have some good fail-safes in place to make sure that doesn't happen. I am on a volunteer basis. I take care of like the jam sessions, and I do some music stuff, and I do some sort of cultural development things. And I think I'll be doing the karaoke once that gets back. Well, I'm doing nothing at the moment because everything is, shut down still because we're a live music venue. So I'm not super informed about like all the little nitty gritty, but I will. But if you pop some questions in the chat, I can come back later and do my best to answer them. And if I don't know, I'll simply say I don't know. But I think the most valuable thing I can say is that if you do want to form a co-op, you can always come to us for help, because we do have some pretty valuable things already made up, and we have some experiences that we can give you directly that will help if you're interested.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Elias. I'm just trying to see, have we lost Linus from the room altogether? Okay, Matt, do you want to tell us a little bit about where you're involved with?
Yeah, so I'm Matt. We have a space called RIC Space in Glasgow. We set up maybe, it's almost 6 years ago. Time flies, isn't it? COVID means time is very valuable, isn't it? But I think it's been 6 years. We set up the premise of talking about trying to find a space for emergent cities. We had some initial projects we wanted to run and some kind of missions that we wanted to create, but beyond that, long story short, we ended up with this massive premises down in the Barras in Glasgow, way bigger than we planned, and it didn't happen in any way expected. I was looking for a venue for about 2 years, very similar to Black Cat. We're doing music, we're looking to do music and arts and some studio spaces as well. But in the end, we ended up finding this massive that just kind of, it came to us, it's a whole other story itself. But I guess the point to take from that is it's great to have all these plans. Like community asset transfer is a great one. But there's also like little random opportunities that when you set intentions in the universe, if you want to set up a project, want to set up a space, quite often, I know it sounds very hippie, but sometimes you just got to think about it and just keep your eyes open, and amazing opportunities come your way. For example, I think, was it last year, they were doing in Salt Market, Glasgow City Council were giving away all the a lot of the shop front for £1 a year, I think it was, for an initial year, because so many of them were empty. So things like that time is right now, I think Glasgow City Council in particular is looking to get rid of some of its assets. They have a lot of empty spaces. Not only that, I've been in touch with Glasgow City Council for many years, looking for another venue, a space that we can evolve after the one, if we ever get into the one we're in. We're currently in a private rented space. It's a bit unstable as such because we still have a private landlord. And as and when we ever decide to develop that property, we might be out on our backsides. So there's lots of things to consider. There is but it's like everything same in the housing market and private rent. You're always at the whim of your landlord. To transfer it's much better. The council, although as at Kenning Park, the situation of Kenning Park, the council aren't always allies with community spaces either. Kenning Park went through a long battle with the Glasgow City Council in order to get to where they are just now, which is another fantastic example here in Glasgow. Kenning Park, their whole backstory, they squatted their premises as part of a community action there as well, similar to Govan Hill, which is again another fantastic case example. Two spaces that got taken over by the communities, and two success stories, both of which are now owned by the community, funded by the council and by central government, and are becoming established community spaces. So much so that Kenning Park is massively has a massive development going on just now. It's fixing its roof and it's expanding, and it's becoming a fantastic, established. It's not just a temporary space as such, which of course is another fantastic model as well, and to get you going.
So maybe that's absolutely brilliant, Matt. The space is such an inspiring example to bring up. But also, I really like that you kind of helped us make the transition there. In the two halves of this workshop, we're looking at, first of all, as I said, legal routes, through renting, buying, asset transfer, things like that. But also taking direct action and communities seeing spaces that are being unused or being misused and taking them over for themselves to do good stuff. So I think that's a really good opportunity to bring in Linus, who now Linus, first of all, I need to ask you, unfortunately, I've only been corresponding with the comrades there in writing. So can you advise me about the correct pronunciation of the neighborhood that you're involved with, the project you're involved with? And then we'll hand it over to you to tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Well, hi everybody. I'm speaking from the Basque Country here in RIC is the name. This is an area, what you said before, which was bought by the local government from the people here, which is with the areas in the southeast of Gasteiz, which is in the Spanish part of the Basque Country, and it was built up in the end of the 50s, and there were people working class neighborhoods, I would say. These are 32 buildings with 6 flats each. We are now here 120 people living in, and the project starts in 2012 when students were looking for a place to live in, basically, but with a political idea behind it, because the rents for flats in each and the price for living here is quite high. Just for you to know that you maybe earn. I'm German, so I some comparisons with German situation. So when you earn maybe 2/3 parts of a wage you get in Germany, but the prices are as high as in Germany. I came from Berlin to here, and I had to pay more money for the flat than in Berlin. So just for you to have an idea. And so the movement starts here. In the beginning, it was just to have a place to live in, but then it grew. I'm living here now for 6 years. When I came in here, we were 60 people, and we tried to build a community, not just to live here and to fight for the right of having a place to live in, but also to change our relationship to ourselves, in between us, and to the things surrounding us. That means that occupation, which has a long history here in the Basque Country, especially for places for youth clubs, or they are called gaztetxe. There were, especially in the 80s and the 90s, there were lots of, each village had a gaztetxe occupied by young people. So in this line, this project here is on a higher level, maybe, because it's not just to have a place where you can meet up and where you can do things. Before I can't remember the name. Sorry for this. Talking about the Black Root, or what was the name? Sorry, I'm a little nervous, so I forget. some
Cat cooperative, maybe.
yeah. So we have lots of things here, like a place for concerts. We have a cinema. We have we started to make bread, and we have lots of gardens where people um, put their I don't know, tomatoes, carrots, and stuff, and where even people from the town, from out, who are not living here, have their part, and so we are in. I don't know how to say that, but the people know us. We are in a wide part of this. We are accepted, although there are. It's not easy because it's illegal, and it's still illegal. We've lost a trial 2 years ago, the only trial we've had until now. So this trial is everything is illegal, obviously. Of course, we took this place and we didn't ask, and we built up our community. Maybe the most important thing, the thing in this is 3 years ago they cut the connection to electricity, and then we started a crowdfunding, and we with this money we constructed a solar system to have our own electricity, which is obviously different to the official system, because you don't have the same intensity of electricity like you would have from the official net, but we are now independent in this question. And they said it's quite interesting, because on one hand there were lots and lots and lots of people helping us, not just giving money or spending money, but even working with us here, and we do special events where we invite people from the whole area and from the Basque Country, or whoever wants to help us. Just for example, to paint the houses. The houses are old, so and when they were bought by the local government, they smashed the windows and did things to that nobody could live in here. And they even said that these are not flats anymore. This is crap. And so we had to build things again. We had when I came here, for example, that year we hadn't had enough windows to put in, and so we had to find windows in different places, asking people, and so in the same thing when they cut electricity, there were lots and lots of people helping us to find or to get solutions for different problems. And this, for me, is maybe one of the most important things here, that you need to be connected with the place you are in. You can't build up a thing like a recaleor without connection to the outer space. I would say, not to the city around, or to the place where you are living. And this is quite important, as well as when you've got problems with police, or when they start their campaigns to get us out here. You need those people supporting your idea or your place or your work. What else? Maybe just inside the structure inside we have is based on five um, ideas, basic ideas, which are not excluding other ideas. For example, um, now where we talk about the climate changes and things, this is not the basic idea we have here, but it's obviously inside our works or ideas what we work on. But the very important thing is that we try to maintain a horizontal structure where the decisions um, um, are made not voting but speaking and find a consensus. And this is very, very, very important because we have problems, or we had problems where people try to get more power and try to build another structure inside here. And this is one of our maybe problems because obviously it's easier when you are 10 people, 10 people deciding and the rest is following. But we try to change this, and we try to live in another way and to find our solutions or decisions we have to make in a different way. So no, it's maybe a little bit confusing what I'm telling, but maybe it's easier.
I
There
think,
are
I think you're
questions.
pretty clear, Linus. Yeah, it's really great. It's an incredible. Like I only discovered Eric Hallior through looking for someone to invite to this session to talk about the experience of these kinds of communities in the Basque Country, and I'm blown over. Like you can't get more independent and autonomous than you have your own power supply. That's absolutely amazing. So
Yeah.
people to have a look at the Eric Hallior website, and I'll post it again in the chat, and have a look at some of the photographs of just what this place is and what we have there. And similarly to what I said to Elias, like I'm really looking forward to pandemic proceedings so that we can come and visit and we can be inspired in person and see what you have there.
Obviously, we've got a hostel where visitors, you write us a message that you would like to visit us, and so you've got a place in our hostel, and then we show you the place, and every answer will be requested, and so responded. Sorry.
That's
And,
fantastic. Let's definitely have that soon. Right, before I say any more myself, I think I'm very aware that there's people in the chat wanting to come in, and maybe Fiona, you want to go next, and then we'll see if Chris can come in after you.
Okay, thanks. It's been really inspiring hearing what's been said, especially just latterly there from Linus, and I look forward to try to find out more. A few of us in Aberdeen have started up the Aberdeen Social Centre, which is kind of, we'd love to be a full-blown cooperative, but we're not, not yet. But yeah, it's we rented space from the local trades council at a solidarity rent, so we don't pay a huge amount. But what we do pay, we sort of finance that by local groups, like progressive groups affiliate us, and we provide a meeting space, we provide shared resources, so a sound system for demos, you know, a stall table, you know, I mean, just the sorts of things that local groups need. But you know, I don't know what it's like in Glasgow, Edinburgh, anywhere else, but in Aberdeen, trying to find space to meet as a group that was free, that you didn't have to pay for, was, you know, really difficult. And most small groups, don't have any money, so don't have anywhere to, they can't, it's a big thing for them to use their scarce resources. So it was just really to say, it's possible to start quite small as well. I think if people are looking to share spaces and resources and pull people together in the locality, you don't have to jump straight in, to a cooperative or a full occupation, like Linus is talking about there, which is wonderful. And I mean, that's what we would all love to see. But, you can start smaller. And sometimes, we've got Krakatoa just around the corner from us, and they're a great example as well. So yeah, there's a few different models, and I would encourage people to try it. I mean, it does take a little bit of organising to begin with, but it really starts to it just really starts to build momentum. So we've got the local groups that affiliate to us, and it's a very small, it's £50 for a year to affiliate to us. But we have XR, we have Aberdeen RIC, we've got the Greens, actually, we've got Yes Aberdeen, Vegan Outreach Scotland. There's just we've got about 20 groups, I think, at the moment, and it's just such a broad range of people, and it's bringing people together that wouldn't necessarily maybe have those direct connections. So we have Skillshare events, and we get groups to come along and talk about what they're organising, campaigning for. So yeah, it's just a very positive thing, and I just wanted to flag that it's possible to do something a bit smaller, a bit more manageable, maybe less daunting to take on. And I would encourage everybody to have a bash.
Very much, Fiona. And I really am glad you're here, because Aberdeen Social Centre is another really important project to highlight. And I share your view. Like, I was so inspired by what I'd heard about Era Calior, that I was like, this is fantastic, but I wonder, is it going to intimidate people in Scotland? Like, we're talking about maybe having a building and they have a whole neighbourhood. So we're definitely hoping to build up to that level, I think. Next, I'm going to bring in Chris. Chris has been waiting for a good minute to speak. Chris, come right now.
Yeah, thanks very much. This is one of my favourite areas. I was a member of a housing co-op in London for 10 years. It was a short life one that had been going for 27 years when I joined it. And the interesting thing about the structure was I didn't have a freehold, I didn't have a lease, didn't have a tenancy, we didn't occupy it without permission. We were members of something called a friendly society, which is a lovely name, don't exist anymore as such. And basically we for as long as we paid the rent, and it needn't have been actually paid in cash, it could have been in non-cash, looking after each other or whatever, we could stay there. So it was an indefinite and secure form of tenure. If you look at south of Glasgow, West Whitlaburn Housing Co-op, they got three blocks, people queuing up to join them, and it's pretty much the only affordable form of tenure there is anywhere, because you're essentially contracting out of the conventional system. It's a voluntary system. The problem has been, and this is my speciality, I'm an expert in sort of legal and financial structures, working on resilience, bottom up, is, well, how do you get these things funded? It's all very well having a co-op, but how do you actually turn inflated housing costs, it's land costs actually, into a co-op? No co-op these days can really afford to get going. That's the problem. And what I've been doing is looking at, shall we say, particularly post-COVID, where we reached a point at what I call it peak rent. Michael Hudson's good on this. Peak debts. If debt can't be paid, it won't be paid. And if rent can't be paid, it won't be paid. And we're seeing, help a poor landlord right now. 18% of retail rents got paid in the last quarter of last year. 18% first quarter this year. It's apocalypse rent right now. I mean, we need a different way of doing it. And in my view, it is possible via, shall we say, consensual agreements, voluntary agreements. These are the agreements I've been working on. Simply by consent, say to a landowner, don't sell your land, put it into the pot. We form a partnership agreement, And then we actually start looking at revenue sharing, production sharing agreements. Long history to that, they're called tithes. You know, nothing new about tithing. Most commercial landlords are getting into revenue sharing leases these days. You know, that's one possibility of, and should we say, an indefinite form of occupation. You build it into the agreement. The second one, and this is my own personal experience in London, what you can do is you can pay people with rental credits. If I give you a rental credit to do something, well, actually, that's something useful. I can actually redeem it in payment for something useful. It might be production, it might be the place I live. And what that does is it stops relying on altruism. And I can tell you in London, there was me and 2 others doing any work, and everybody else was just basically, you know, smoking dope, you know, because it was a short life housing co-op. And I put together a buyout for the co-op to basically, you know, go with the model that I'm talking about. And it was the best value, except the mayor sold it off to his corrupt mates. You know, sorry, shit happens sometimes. So, you know, from a practical perspective of finance and funding, I can tell you that there are voluntary, mutual, reciprocal agreements that transcend borders, which enable us to mobilize what we want to do. You know, just to sum up, I can say this: if you got the land, if you got the resources, if you got the people, why do you need money? You don't. You need agreement. You need an accounting system, and you need the will. It's that simple.
Very much, Chris. And again, some really incredible specialist knowledge there that I think we really would like to capture and try and make that available for people beyond this event. I think it would be good perhaps if people in this workshop who are interested in continuing this event will maybe put around details about getting some of this all into one place and having a wee meeting about putting together some fact sheets and materials to share with people, because I really would like to not lose the expertise that's in this room. So
it's basically bottom-up resilience. I think of it as cooperative individualism. You know, okay. Be an individual, but recognize you have a responsibility to your fellow man and woman. You know, and I think we can actually do that simply and effectively, and we don't need anybody's permission to do it. We just consent.
Next, I'm going to bring in Maddie. You want to go, Maddie?
Hiya. Yeah, that was a really great contribution, Chris. Yeah, please do email us at contact@ric.scot with some of your details to just be able to continue that conversation and develop some resources on that. I shared in the chat the Mid-Steeple Quarter group, which is actually a small town in Dumfries that managed to get their entire high street, a few different buildings in their high street, community owned and used for community goods and stuff. And they did that with a mix of campaigning, getting funding, and talking to the Scottish Land Commission as well, which is another avenue that is available, is that the Scottish Land Commission are helping communities sort of get into agreements with owners that aren't using their land or using derelict land for community purposes. So that is something else that we should definitely try and explore more. But the Mid-Steeple group, they actually do workshops and provide people with sort of a template of their experience and how they got things done. But yeah, they do charge 100 quid for somebody to come speak on that, but they have a resource page on the site that I shared as well to be able to sort of model on that. It was a very practical plan, so it's very interesting to look at, I think.
Let's bring on Paul, and then hopefully we'll be able to come back to you in a moment, Derek.
Hi, I just wanted to contribute a bit on the subject, just about one of the few examples of a squat that has happened at least in recent years in Scotland, that I know of, at least in Glasgow in 2018, in the autumn. A group of people, living rent members and also anarchists, and kind of a hodgepodge of various radical people that knew each other from various scenes, came together to basically, there was a big block of flats in kind of the west end of Glasgow, owned by this infamous slumlord, RIC, who had recently that year been struck off. He'd been barred legally from being a landlord, and he, I think in the 90s, he owned a death trap flat where 2 young students died in a fire It was like ground floor, bars in the windows, typical fire trap stuff. And so, activists got word of some flats he owned that were vacant and condemned. Actually, they weren't in amazing condition, at least in one part, but generally though they were a massive old kind of big upper class house that a group of us basically took over, squatted. I didn't take part in the initial takeover of the building, but I did go and help out with the cleaning up and doing the getting things together. It's unfortunate that it didn't last very long. We basically we were going to go public on a certain day and have a big rally and get like big public support. And until then, we were basically banking on being able to get the flats, get the squat set up and all of that. And unfortunately, the police intervened in favor of a man who shouldn't legally own that building or even be able to, own property. But the police got us on one day when we didn't have enough people in the building to support us. And they got in quite quick and then knocked the door down, unfortunately. And yeah, we lost the squat before we could go public with it and raise the public support that would have allowed us to, hold it much more for much longer. Unfortunately, I suppose it's hard to bring many lessons from it because the group that was committed to continuing squatting, because there was an idea that, we should continue, we should keep going and like do more squats. A lot of the people who contributed to that are unfortunately, they've moved away. There were some interpersonal squabbles that really cut into things, but a few of the people involved in it are still around, and I think it would be worth trying to compile some of the experience from that squat, because Scotland doesn't have much of a squatters movement. I mean, the squatting laws are quite tough here, but it really requires quite a militant movement. I remember a Greek comrade of mine who was involved in the squat talked about how basically he always said how it will be tough at the start, but it takes a lot of militant action and pushing and keeping going with squat after squat and having the people there to keep going with it, because that's how it worked in Greece. And they were able to have things like exarchia, the neighbourhoods there, which are like full of anarchist squats. But it took decades of work and struggle and sacrifice by anarchist comrades to keep going with squats and to hold them against the police and against fascists, against all kinds of repressive movements. But the Queen's Crescent squat was an interesting start, but it's definitely something that the experience of it hasn't really been written down. It's not barely known about really by anyone but the people who are involved. So there is one example of a squat in Scotland, but unfortunately, it didn't last.
Thanks very much for sharing that experience. I really agree. Like, there's lots of these things that have happened and have not been documented, and people have to relearn the lessons every time. And that was kind of our hope with this session as well, getting different people that had been through experience in different projects would be able to pass that on for the benefit of people that are thinking about doing it more.
Hi, I'm Derek. I'm based in Dundee. I just basically wanted to give a shout out to let folks know I run Make That Take Records, which is a DIY punk label and collective based in Dundee. We have been operational for 15 years now. 2 years ago, 2019, my partner Hazel and I had to form a new company, basically, talking about spaces. We've, as a label and a progressive punk rock organization, we've faced hostilities for spaces, for concerts and gatherings ever since we've existed. We started with our organising in house shows and back rooms of pubs and any kind of places that could accommodate some non-commercially interested musicians and punks and anarchists and socialists and the vast swathe. And over the last 15 years or so, we've had a lot of collective experience touring in Europe, in the anarchist squat networks throughout Europe. And in Dundee, basically we commandeered the space, a place called Conroy's Basement, that we ran shows in and meetings for a long time. It was a disused downstairs of a pub, which we managed to wrangle use of the space without commercial and monetary contracts or anything like that. We struck up an affiliation-based working relationship with the landlords of this pub, and we were in there for 4 years, and then the landlord decided that he was closing that pub, and for a long time we had talked about collectivizing an actual non-profit, but then humans enter the equation, and with the best will in the world, sometimes when it comes to shared responsibilities, people are sometimes reluctant to take them on. So we were in a position of privilege insofar that Hazel and I had being the operative word now, the resources available to us to be able to take on the running of another company. Hazel's an artist herself, as am I, and basically we took over this space, and we now run what is called Rad Apples. It's an independent vegan bar and diner in Dundee, music venue downstairs, and the members of the RIC Dundee have been using our space up until before the pandemic hit to meet and organise, and we're a queer-friendly space. And Hazel and I are both anarchists, so whilst it's perhaps not ideal insofar as that we are a limited company because we have to exist under the constraints of capitalism, but we try to run our business upon ethical principles, anarchist principles, solidarity, internationalism, harm reduction, safer spaces, all these ideas. And I'll wrap up here basically by just saying that anytime folks need a spot to organise or just a quiet table in a local boozer to have a conversation or meet, we are available. We're not open at the moment. We've chosen to remain closed during the COVID pandemic, but we still have all our staff. Everyone has been paid. We pay above the national living wage or whatever it is they call it these days. And yeah, I just wanted to pitch our space and say, just let it be known to everyone that has gathered there before or may not know about the existence of our space, that welcome anytime. And we have networks for the dissemination of information, and if there's anything that we can do to help propagate these ideas, please do let us know.
Fantastic, Derek. I'm really glad we got your mic working to hear all that. And I'm really inspired that we've called this workshop today, and so many people that are involved in other projects that we hadn't thought of have seen it and come forward to be involved.
So I want to talk more about it, just to pull back a wee bit and talk about a general approach. I know there's a lot of people here who are already, involved in taking space and how important it is. But I just wanted to sort of cover both sides of this, as regards how important it is for the independence movement, but also how the independence movement itself could be something for people who are already thinking along these lines in terms of having the space. So independence is obviously going to be an inevitable consequence of a movement and a process. But the movement and the process don't take place simply in people's minds, even although that sometimes sounds like what people are trying to tell you. It's all, talking shops and no action. So they've got to have a happen on a physical basis or not at all. I mean, we could go about acting as if we're independent, which again has been a bit of a buzz phrase, but that's been tried and it's really failed, hasn't it? Or we could occupy space for ourselves and start to build our alternative, and the emphasis is on actually building it physically. So my view is that we should really be doing this on the basis of centres for social reproduction. And I do believe in the necessity of art, by the way, but that to me is not what we should be taking spaces for fundamentally. It should be for learning how we reproduce ourselves as a species And I know that sounds like a really ambitious thing, but ultimately that's how you get to the revolutionary place that we're trying to get. You know, we're talking about seceding from the British state and having something which is completely different, and ultimately get away as far away from capitalism as we can in the process. So that's why I think that's the way that we should base it. You know, they should be social reproduction centres. So this way we can also develop our preferred methods of democratic organising as demanded by each aspect of the overall process of reproducing, and as equitably, inclusively nurtured and empowered a fashion as we can. There should be an early and consistent emphasis on dissipating individual accumulation of power or goods in order to avoid empire building or any other deformation of the internal democracy. And I was excited to hear some of our earlier contributors talk about how they approached that. Just a tiny bit of history. I mean, during early capitalism, one of the most important things they did was to take away our land. And this is almost complete now. And most land is now in private hands. And of course, that was a big part of what the early campaigning against capitalism was all about. And then it kind of went away. Now, there's a reason for that. But we can change it, but only if we make it central to what we do, instead of it just being something that fringe elements do. It's a revolutionary concept to take back physical space from the capitalists, because land underpins all capital, literally and financially. They use it as collateral and as leverage on large-scale transactions, and they hide its role. In classical political economy, it had land as one of the three factors of production, along with labour and capital. But neoclassical economics portrays everything as capital, so that the human aspect of labour, the non-fungible aspect of land, which you also find in the newer currencies, are non-fungible. But that's hidden, and it's deliberately hidden. So to take back the land, we start to undermine the material basis of capital, as well as empowering ourselves. And I'd like anybody who hasn't seen it already to have a look at what the Black socialists in America were doing. And they've built a dual power map about places that all the co-ops and all the people who have got spaces all up and down the country. It's in its early stages, but I think the way that they've done it is something we can learn from and we can try and model as well. One thing I will say, just to conclude, in response to Chris, I mean, therefore, if you like, after what I've already said, I'm not agnostic as to who owns the land, because ownership ultimately determines use. And that's what we've found throughout capitalism. And so we need to put plans together as to how we deal with ownership and occupation. So how we do things legally and how we do things illegally, and have a really good conception of both of those.
Thank you very much, Craig, for the kind of bigger picture thought about what lies behind all some of the more practical stuff we've talked about today. What I would say, we've been talking about it in the chat. There's been loads and loads of really amazing projects talked about here that have been inspiring from many, many different angles. I've made a note of every project that's been discussed, and I think we should do some work after this to make sure that all this information and some of the expertise that people were sharing here is collated in a way that's easily accessible for people. And so we'll be producing a resource like that. And if folk want to get involved in that, just give us an email. Rick's email address is contact@rick.scott. I'll drop that in the chat as well. But yeah, look out for that. And I also dropped in the chat the link to sign up to the Radical Independence Campaign mailing list. So obviously, once we have this stuff produced, we'll send out information about how to access it via that as well.
Oh.
But thank you very, very much for everyone for joining us. And thank you especially to our speaker, Mr. Elias. And I think now let's go and take a wee break, get away from the screen for 10 minutes and be refreshed for our next session at 4 o'clock. Thanks very much.
Hello.